This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up? What's up? Real MVPs, Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, he's back in his seat where he belongs, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back for the Prime Time Podcast right here on MVP. Talking college football, we talk college basketball. Those are the two main that we talk about. Sometimes we dabble with a little bit of college baseball here and there, but we are basically in full college football mode, Brandon. As I don't know if you remember from your time off here at the Primetime Podcast, but we're going through each kind of conference, each division. We're previewing teams. We're done.
How's that been going?
We're done with the SEC. Well? We're done with the Big 12. Just finished that a week ago. And now we move into one of our favorite conferences.
The ACC?
The ACC, the ACC. And the reason why I say it's one of our favorites is for just a behind-the-scenes kind of a thing. Last year, this conference will always hold a near and dear place in my heart because last year, as you and I were getting ready for VidCon 2017, we decided to do all 14 previews in a single night, and that probably was not the best decision.
You can take out the probably. You can take out the probably.
That was most likely not a good decision to do all 14 of those in one night, but we are only doing 7 tonight, Brandon, as we are going to look at the Atlantic this week. Then we'll move on into the Coastal. Before then, we still got the Big Ten, and we still got the Pac-12 to do before we get to then our college football predictions, and we got to wait to do our season predictions after these previews. But how we usually do it, if you're new, we start with the team that was worse last year in the division, go on up to the best team. That's always the Clemson Tigers, it seems. Before we get into everything, a little housekeeping here at the beginning. Number one, make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. If you want to join a podcast, we have a $10 tier for that. That link down below in the description. You can also look at our store. Get an MVP t-shirt. I always point to my shirt, even though I'm not wearing it, because usually my shirt is black, and that's the same color as the MVP shirt. You can also see our store at mostvaluablepodcast.com, where you can catch MVP each and every day. And then last but not least, if you have Apple Podcasts, you're listening to us on iTunes, you have an iTunes, make sure to give the Primetime Podcast and all the MVP podcasts a 5-star rating. It would really help us out and let us know why you like listening to the podcast each and every week. But Brandon, housekeeping over, beginning of the podcast over, it is time to start our ACC preview, and we're going to look at the Atlantic. Let's start with the first team on the docket today. We are looking at the Syracuse Orange. This is a team that was 2-6 in conference last year. They were 4-8 overall. And the big thing this year, the big thing that you'll hear when you hear about the Orange is they're not talking about being best in the Atlantic. They're not talking about playoffs in Syracuse. They're just talking about, hey, this could be a good year. We could win 6 games. We can get to a bowl game. What is your main thoughts about Syracuse? And will they be bowl eligible in 2018?
Well, the number one thought for me, for Syracuse, is the health of Eric Dungey at quarterback. That's going to be the number one thing. In his past 3 seasons, he hasn't been able to finish one of them completely healthy. That's going to be the absolute key here for the Syracuse Orange. And the reason being is because if he can stay healthy, he's got the talent. People look at him as being one of the most talented and one of the toughest guys in the ACC, and possibly one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. So if he's able to stay healthy, stay on the field, he's going to be able to bring this team more wins than what they were able to get last year.
He is a guy that has, last year played 9 games, 2016 played 9, 2015 played 8. And the thing I like about him is he's a dual threat guy, can do it with his legs, can do it with his arms. The question is, though, like you said, is can he stay healthy? Whereas last year, played in the 9 games, 4 of the games that he played in were the wins against Pittsburgh, against Clemson, you had Central Michigan, and then, of course, the big win against Central Connecticut State. The question, though, that you got to pose after that, and this is the one that, for me, I feel like is the hardest to answer for Syracuse, is all right, if Dungey goes down, will the redshirt freshman and Tommy DeVito be enough? Will he be the guy to come out and, all right, Dungey's done, but don't worry, we got DeVito. He can carry the team on the shoulders because, yeah, this is a kid that's been with the program for a year, being a redshirt freshman, but this would be the first time that he would be getting actual game experience with the Syracuse Orange.
Well, I wanted to make one more point about Eric Dungey, was that he was the guy who led this team to the upset win against Clemson last season. 278 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air, no interceptions, no turnovers. That was the really big thing. And I want to get into more of that Syracuse-Clemson game from last year here in a little bit as well. But if they have to turn to Tommy DeVito, the hope is that they will not have to, because it will be a full, healthy season for Eric Dungey. But if they do have to turn to DeVito, they're going to be relying on a guy who's got skill, who's got talent, but who's still going to be raw, who's still going to be very, very raw. And we're going to look then to have Syracuse rely a little bit more, I think, on the running game. And that's what head coach Dino Babers wants to see. He wants to see more consistency out of the running game. With Dante Strickland, with Mo Neal. Strickland, he could go for 800 to 1,000 yards this season. I could see him hitting the 1,000-yard mark. Neal had 658 yards last season. These guys can add a little bit more to their production this year, and they're going to have to, I think. If they want to be able to get more wins, if they want to be able to put themselves bowl eligible, they're going to have to do a little bit more on the ground. They're going to have to push the envelope just a little bit more each and every game, but they also have to get the opportunity.
Well, and I mean, another thing, too, that you got to mention is they have Dungey coming back. Hopefully he stays healthy, but both their top receivers from last year, gone. Got to replace them. Your best reliable pass catcher becomes your tight end in Ravavian. I probably screwed that first name up. Pierce, basically. Pierce, the tight end, becomes your most reliable pass catcher. And the thing that I wonder for this Syracuse team is, yes, they have the piece at quarterback if he stays healthy, but will the rest of this offense kind of come together and be enough to beat teams that they will have on their schedule, like a Clemson, like a Florida State now under Willie Taggart, like a Louisville team, like a Wolfpack team from North Carolina? Will they be able to come together and give those teams a run for their money?
Well, 2 things really quickly. Replacing Steve Ishmael with his 105 receptions and over 1,000 yards, that's going to be really hard. You've got 2 guys in Devin Butler and Nykeem Johnson who are going to lead the receiving core. But these guys, while they are big speedsters, they both have flaws themselves. Consistency on the side of Butler, physicality on the side of Johnson, not being able to really have a great burst from the line of scrimmage, and that's where you really want to win it. If you're going to be a receiver and you're going to be a speed guy, getting down the field as quickly as you can is imperative. And if you can't do that right off the line, that's going to hurt you. That's going to hurt your stock. That's going to hurt your value. And you're not going to be as good or as great of a threat as you could be. But going to the Syracuse-Clemson game from last season, you talk about, some of these games, some of these teams that they're going to be playing against. Syracuse won this game. They won 27-24, so they were able to put up 27 points. But they won this game based on defense. Surprisingly enough, a Syracuse team that gave up 32.2 points per game last season won this game on defense, which is really absurd because Syracuse didn't play defense the rest of the season for the most part. Defensively, and we'll get into that in a minute, they did struggle. But on third down efficiency, Clemson was 2 of 11. They were 2 of 11 on third down. They were not able to get anything going on third down. That was a huge thing that Syracuse was able to do. Passing, only 204 yards. Rushing, 113 yards. There was nothing going on there for Clemson. So Syracuse, what they're going to have to do, and they also control the time of possession. 34 minutes, almost 35 minutes compared to just over 25 minutes for Clemson. So let's say they controlled it for almost a whole 10 more minutes. Well, geez. Syracuse, now that's a blueprint for success. You had enough offense if you're Syracuse, you have a 440 total yards. That should get you a lot of wins. But defensively, that's where they were good. And that's what you're going to need to see this year, because I think Syracuse's offense will be good enough to continue to be able to put up good points. I think that they're going to be able to do that. But defensively is where you're going to have to really clamp down, especially in the secondary, which is where I think that they've had their letdowns the past couple of years. They're going to need to really, really focus in on that area and improve.
Here's the thing I'm looking at. And for me, with this Syracuse team, don't be and Syracuse fans are probably going to listen to this and go, duh, Ricky, we know this, but I'm going to say it anyways. Don't be thinking college football playoff. Don't be thinking ACC championship. Don't be thinking Atlantic championship. Hell, don't even be thinking, in my mind, don't be thinking Boston College level of we are going to finish in the top 4 of this division. To me, the only goal that Syracuse should be thinking about this year, if I am a Syracuse fan, is getting enough wins to become bowl eligible. Because for me, when I'm sitting here with Babers, this being his, 3rd year? This is going to be year 3 of Dino Babers at Syracuse. This is usually the time, 3rd, 4th year, where we look at college coaches and go, all right, buddy, it's on you. No more excuses of I don't got my guys in here. No more excuses of, I haven't set up my culture yet. Usually year 3, you should start to see the beginnings of what a team is going to look like with that head coach. This year and next year will be the big ones. So I would be looking for, your goal should be a bowl game. And I look at the schedule, and Syracuse fans, just put your hands together and say some prayers. Because the schedule makers did you some favors you should be thankful for. You don't have to play a top 10 Miami team that you had to play last year, that Dungey, he played well against Clemson, but the only time he threw more than 1 pick was when he threw 4 of them against the Hurricanes last year. You don't have to play them. You know who they get instead? It's at home, which makes it better. They get a 1-7 North Carolina Tar Heel team from last year. Woo, thank Jesus. Thank you that we are playing this team at home. That could be a win. Then you look at Notre Dame. You get them. That's a neutral siter. I'm not saying that's a for sure win. But Notre Dame, late in the year, they could be down and out, down on their luck. Ooh, the fans wanting to fire Brian Kelly. That's where they could be come November 17th. That could be a winnable game. You look at their out of conference this year. Western Michigan, it's on the road, but it's a winnable one. Wagner, however you want to say it, they should beat them. UConn, that should be a win. If you win the out-of-conference games with their 3, you get that North Carolina game, then it's basically finding 2 other games. You beat a Pittsburgh, a team that you beat last year. If you find a way to beat a Notre Dame, beat a Wake Forest, then you could be bowl eligible. It's go perfect in our non-conference, win the games you're supposed to win, like the North Carolina game, and then it's just finding 2 more games to just be close in and steal it in the end. And with Eric Dungey, if he stays healthy, this Syracuse team, to me, could go 3-0 in the non-conference, beat North Carolina, and find a way to win 2 other games on their schedule. Hell, I threw out Florida State. We don't even know what kind of a Florida State team we're going to get that early of the year, if not this season altogether, because they might not be the same Florida State team that we're used to. So that might be a win for Syracuse this year. It is very doable. The goal this year should be, let's win 6 games, let's get to a bowl game, and then build on it in year 4 for Babers.
Syracuse, if everything goes right for them, they should win at least 5 games. There should be at least 5 games that they win on this schedule. And if there's going to be a team that I think that they could sneak up on, this would be a little sneak attack that
Upset
Syracuse,
special.
a little upset special, that could be the 11-9 game against Louisville.
Okay.
At home, they have Louisville at home. There is no more 400 yards Lamar Jackson.
Syracuse fans won't see the hurdle in their, well, now it'll just be in their dreams because he's in the NFL. That game in the Carrier Dome where he hurdled over that Syracuse defender, you won't be seeing that because Lamar Action Jackson ain't out there for the Cardinals.
You're going to be getting a Javon Pass, guy who's more of a pocket presence, guy who's not really going to take off and run. This is going to be, for the most part, a very new Louisville team that Bobby Petrino, this is the first time in a long time that it's going to look like this. There's not a whole lot to be excited about defensively. They're not this just overwhelming team anymore. And I hate to say that it all comes with one player. It all goes with one player. But a lot of it was with and rested with on the shoulders of Lamar Action Jackson.
Plus, it was a media circle whenever LSU came to town because of Lamar Jackson. Because everyone, national media, everyone, all eyes were on Jackson. So even though you were playing Louisville, the eyes were on you because they were on who you were playing.
So I think that there's a game that Syracuse could upset and win, and that could be their 6. If the other ones you mentioned, if they take care of business there. But there's, we're going to see a game where, like we saw last year, Clemson, everyone believed Clemson was going to go in and just throttle Syracuse. Almost everyone believed that. They didn't do it. They didn't do it. So we're going to see stuff like that happen
during one of our fantasy football, I think there was a Friday night game because it was during one of our Twitch Final Fantasy streams. Because I remember someone in that stream was like, "Oh my God, Clemson, they're going to lose to Syracuse," and I was sitting there going, "Yes, let them lose to Syracuse."
It was on a Friday night.
But the thing is, on the other end, you got to avoid the other thing from happening as well.
You got to take care of business.
You can't have like a Tar Heel team or like a West Virginia team where I just gave you wins in those games because I'm all gracious and I'm nice. You can't go and lose those games, one of those, because then it's like, great, now we got to find a win somewhere else in the schedule to suffice for that to get to that bowl eligible.
Yeah, I want to take a minute here and talk a little bit about their defense. So they've got a really good force at nose tackle with Chris Slayton. They've got some really good experience on the edge. Alton Robinson returns. He had 5 sacks last season. He's a guy who's going to be a really big force, I think, on the defensive side. Syracuse could find themselves in a lot of opposing offensive backfields because they could really and should. With what should be a really good and pretty solid defensive line, they should be able to pile up some sacks this season. In the secondary, though, I think they need to get better. They only had 4 interceptions last year. They had 30 passes defended. They returned Chris Frederick, Scoop Bradshaw, Evan Foster. Chris Frederick had an interception last year. Bradshaw 21 tackles, and Foster had an interception that led to a touchdown. These guys are going to anchor the secondary. They're going to be good. They're going to need some other guys to be there as well because they can't do it all. They'll do a lot, but they can't do it all. They need to be able to make sure they have depth behind them. Injuries are a thing that happens. Nicks, bruises. You're going to have to go out. They're going to need other guys to be in there. They're going to need to defend more passes. And I think that if they do that, this Syracuse team is going to be, I believe, a much, much improved team. Again, we're not talking playoff, but we should. It would be a disappointment, I think, if Syracuse does not make a bowl game this year.
Well, and that'll be the big thing of, even if I would say 5 to 6 wins is a successful year, even if you miss bowl eligibility by that one game, I would still say that's a successful year because it's then that much closer to the bowl eligible drought or the bowl drought ending for Syracuse. But I think that this team will get 6 wins this year. Yeah, they might only get like 3 wins. Well, to be bowl eligible, they'll have to get 3 wins. They might be a 3-win team in conference, which you look at and you go, woohoo, we're 3-5 instead of 2-6 in conference. But you look at the out of conference and you get the 6 wins, and then whoever you play in the bowl game, you could be just like Boston College last year, where it was, hey, we finished 6-6 in the regular season. Go us. We get a win in the bowl game. There we go, 7-6. and you could finish just like that if you're Syracuse. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. Will Dungey stay healthy this year? That's the biggest question for him. What do you think for the offense? What do you think for the defense? And will this team become bowl eligible in Baber's third year as coach in 2018? Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. But Brandon, let's move on to the next team, a team that we are not used to, much like Mark and I on the NFL side when we talked about the Packers second on the NFC North preview. We are usually not used to talking about this team and the next team so soon in podcasts. Usually it's, you know what, we're going to wait till the end. It'll be Louisville, followed by Florida State, followed by Clemson. Bada bing, bada boom, bada bam, and you end the podcast. But this year, Louisville and Florida State towards the front. We're taking a look at Florida State, who is next up in the standings for the Atlantic Division. I'm going to start this real easy. We have talked about before the whole Francois Blackman debate. You can check that up above Brandon's head. I want to ask you this to start this preview. What should Seminole fans, what should their expectations be with Willie Taggart's first year on campus? Jimbo Fisher out the door, Willie Taggart in the door in Tallahassee.
I think they should expect 8 to 9 wins. I think they should expect a better team this season. They had some problems last year. The injury to Francois was just the beginning. I think that defensively they were not good. Mm-hmm. They were bad. They gave up a lot of points. They had just a lot of games where they just didn't seem to be all there. Mm-hmm. Really on both sides of the football, and they never clicked. And part of it too is you may need to put some of the blame on Jimbo Fisher. I think that as the season started to get away, I think the more and more he started to become less interested.
Out the door.
And I hate to say that because you don't want to believe that, but if you've ever left a job, I think that when you know that there's something better on the horizon possibly, and you want to be ahead, and you already know that if there's going to be an offer, and you know that there's going to be a number of teams that are going to come, that there's going to be a number of team and head coaching of job offers that are going to come available, someone's going to come for you, and you're going to take one of them. And that was where Jimbo Fisher was.
Once you're absent mentally, it's hard to reel that back in.
Yeah, it is. But I think that Willie Taggart is a good guy for this position. Mm-hmm. I think he comes from I think he has a nice background. He comes from a very up-tempo type of offensive style, which is good, which is different than the pro-style offense that Jimbo Fisher has run in the past. I think we've talked about this before. It's going to be better for the players. The offensive playbook is not going to be as in-depth, which doesn't mean it's not going to be as good. It just means it's going to be easier to grasp. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be good for the players. It's going to be good for the young guys, and it's going to be good for a guy like James Blackman, who might end up being the starting quarterback. So I know we already talked about quarterback, but I want to take a little bit of a step back.
It's a big discussion. Who's going to be starting?
I want to take a little bit of
a
step back, and to my previous thoughts, it would be DeAndre Francois, and I believed he would be the better one. After looking at it a little bit more, analyzing some of the things, some of the film, some of the tape from last year, and just overall, I really think that James Blackman could get the starting nod. And I think that because you're looking at a DeAndre Francois who's not completely 100% healthy. He's a quarterback that is extremely athletic. But you also look on the other side, and you get James Blackman, who's 6'5", so his frame is already better than DeAndre Francois. He's lighter at 185. He's a skinny guy. I mean, you could blow him over with your breath. Mm-hmm. But if he can add some muscle, add some LBs, I think he's going to be just fine. Good velocity on his throws, tight spiral, good touch and accuracy, not only on the deep passes, but on the short crossing routes. That has a lot of touch. It has everything to do with touch, and that is very important. And he can do it on the run. Avoids defenders, can see over the top of defenders, makes it much easier. However, he could work on footwork, and like I said before, he needs to add some more muscle, he needs to add some more pounds. But this guy, I'm going to change my stance. I hate to be a flip-flopper, but Ricky, I know you're a flip-flopper, and people, some hate you, some don't, but that's okay. They can hate me or not hate me, but I think I would flip and say that Florida State, moving forward, has a better opportunity with James Blackman at the helm because of his intangibles, because of his skills and his athleticism, and because right now, if you looked and you said, who's the true leader? Who's more of a true leader? How can you not say James Blackman with all the missteps off the field that DeAndre Francois has gotten himself into?
To me, I'm going to take a little pivot and turn because for me, I'm not really... This is the one thing where I know back when we did the video on between the two of them that you can say you're good and you're bad. Blackman probably, like you said, more of the leader than Francois because of every choice that Francois has made so far. You look at it and go, what the hell are you thinking, man? What the hell are you thinking? But to me, I figure whichever quarterback Willie Taggart picks is going to be fine.
Yeah.
But to me, I look at a position that I was looking through some of the comments just now that we've got even from last year. When we did our video of can DeAndre Francois bring the Florida State to the playoff, this player was mentioned. When we did our preview before last season, this player was mentioned. Hell, when we even did a Virginia Tech preview, this player was mentioned, and he was mentioned a ton when we did the will DeAndre Francois be the starting quarterback this year for the Seminoles, and that's Cam Akers. Yeah. To me, Cam Akers needs to have, and I am going to highlight a comment here, and it's not highlighting a comment like, ooh, this guy was wrong, but it comes from Jalen Lang over a year ago when we did the video. I'm going to look up the exact title here. It was when we were talking about, can DeAndre Francois help Florida State reach the playoffs in 2017. We recorded that video or posted that video May 4th of 2017. It has been a while since we posted that video. And Lang said, on top of that, they also have Cam Akers, who I like a lot, and I think he will have a huge season to help Francois and the Seminoles. You look at the stat sheet, he had a pretty good year. He had over 1,000 yards.
Broke a record.
He was running over 5 yards per carry and had 7 touchdowns. You want to know the bad part about that, though? I need to see more from Cam Akers. If this team, to me, is going to be a very successful team, like you said, 8 to 9 wins, Cam Akers needs to be, and I'm not talking numbers-wise, I'm just saying in general, he needs to be on the Heisman ballot. He needs to be so good, he is one of the top 5 in the Heisman running this year. That's what we need. We need Cam Akers to be the same nationally good as Dalvin Cook was for the Florida State Seminoles. That's what we need.
And he can be. If you've looked at him, if you watched anything of him last season,
I'm not saying he can't.
He definitely can be. What I'm talking about is the Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook obviously ended up being great. He's with the Minnesota Vikings, was having a great season, got hurt. He'll have another great season this year, hopefully a full one. But Cam Akers can duplicate exactly what he did.
He can
absolutely do it.
He is the key piece because I look at this schedule, and the thing that bothers me most about this schedule are the road games. They're playing at Syracuse. Syracuse was a 2-win team in conference last year, but we just talked about Syracuse. We just talked about early on, could they get a little bit of a jump on Florida State? If Florida State ain't clicking right away, on the road, that could be a game that worries me. You play Louisville on the road. You're playing Miami, who will probably be a top 10 team this year, on the road. You're playing NC State on the road. You're playing a Notre Dame team on the road. Yeah, you get Florida State at home. Yeah, you get Clemson at home. But the two things that are worse about those matchups is, from any Florida and Florida State game, it don't matter where you play that game. And I could almost say the same thing for Miami and Florida State, But Miami this year will be so much on a different talent level than Florida State that it will make a difference where they play that game. And I look at all the road games that this team has, and right now, I would put a loss against Louisville. I would put a loss against Miami. I would put a loss against NC State. Notre Dame, I go, because I'm usually not that high on Notre Dame. I don't think they beat Clemson. I don't think they beat Florida. That is 5 games right there that I think are for sure losses. Then if they lose to a Notre Dame, they lose to a Virginia Tech. This could be a very different season than we're used to seeing for Florida State. They could get 8 wins, but I feel like if they get 8 or 9 wins, it's because they put 110% into the season and fought through everything and fought through adversity. Because otherwise, I look this schedule in the face and it gives me every reason to think they're just going to get their teeth kicked in some of these games. And when I say teeth kicked in, I don't mean like blown out. I just mean they lost the game, which ends up being an L in the column, which at the end of the year, we're looking at W's and L's.
Well, the way that you put it was very dramatic and could happen, but I just don't know if that's all going to happen. I mean, again, you kind of put them, the very first game of the season is not going to be easy. Virginia Tech to start things off, even at home, is not easy. And then you go against, Sanford and Sons, week 2. That should be a win. Can't
really do it. I'm getting over a cold. I tried to do it, and I just couldn't do it.
On the road at Syracuse, Syracuse is an improved team, but I still think that Florida State is better. I think that should be a win. NIU, that should probably be a win. I'm personally, not right now at least, I'm not high on Louisville, even though it's on the road. That should be a win in my mind. Miami's going to be a tough game. It's just flat out going to be a tough game. It's going to, as long as the U is still good, it's going to be a tough game.
I'm putting that down as an L all day, every day.
Wake Forest, I would think it's a win, but look at what Wake Forest's offense was last year. Explosive. Very, very good. Clemson, they're always good. It could be a dogfight or it could be a blowout. I don't know. NC State, they were a great team last year on the road there. Could be a tough one. Notre Dame, it's always a toss-up. Are they going to suck or are they going to be great? You just never know. Boston College, and then Florida. Florida, I think right now, I personally...
Florida would be better this year with Dan Mullen.
But right now, I would give the edge to Florida State. Right now, I'd give the edge to Florida State.
I'd be on the other side. I have more faith, and this isn't going to be a Florida State-Florida debate here. It's just I have more faith in what Dan Mullen will make the team by the end of the year than I do Willie Taggart.
I'm just saying that you made it seem like it was a lot of doom and gloom.
It
for
could
Florida
be.
State, but I don't think it's going to be as doom and gloom. I'm not saying that they're going to be I'm not saying they're going to be a playoff team, but I am saying that they're going to be an improved team to 8 to possibly 9 wins. So I'm not saying that they're going to be just jumping up and to this extreme, like they're going to win 10 games. But
let's be honest,
this team has got to be better than last year.
And let's be honest, like you look at it and you go, all right, 8 to 9 wins. It shouldn't be that much of a stretch. This is a team that, although they finished near the bottom in the ACC, they were a 7-win team last year. But their wins, you got to look at who they came against. They came against the Wake Forest team. That one was on the road, so that's another reason why I didn't bring up Wake Forest. I think that Florida State can beat them. But you look at it, Syracuse was not that good of a team to me. Yeah, you beat Clemson, but you played up for that game. They beat Delaware State, where it's like, really? You beat Delaware State? Who gives a crap? You beat Florida on the road. Florida was barely a football team last year, kicking McWayne out of town by that point. And then Louisiana Monroe. You should win that game, no problem. Oh, and one of those 7 wins was your bowl game against Southern Miss. Last time I checked, Brett Favre is not lacing it up for Southern Miss anymore. That is an old reference, but that is how long Southern Miss has been relevant in my mind. I look at their wins last year. They came against easy teams. Yeah, the teams differ this year. Like we said, no Lamar Jackson for Louisville, but you couldn't beat NC State at home. Now you get them on the road. You couldn't beat Louisville at home. Now you get them on the road. Hell, you couldn't beat Clemson on the road. Now you get them at home. And the thing about Clemson, we'll get to at the end of this podcast, is they've got one of the best defenses that they might have in years, and you got to play them this year. So this year I feel like Florida State, they might be a better team when it comes to like on paper, but in the wins and losses, I think because of how the schedule plays out, they did play Miami last year. They played them at home and they lost only by 4 points. Now put that game in Miami with a Miami team, to me, that these teams are going in the opposite direction when it comes to talent on the field and coaches on the sideline, because Mark Richt and Jimbo Fisher were right up there even. I'm putting Mark Richt way above Willie Taggart right now when it comes to 1v1.
Give Willie a little bit of credit.
I'm sorry, 1v1 in a football game, I'm going to pick Mark Richt's team over Willie Taggart's team.
So all I'm saying is that, yeah, I think that the schedule has gotten more difficult this year for Florida State. Anyone who looks at this year's schedule and last year's schedule is going to say that this year's schedule, I think, is more difficult.
Or is it easy? It's easier just because you don't have Alabama on the schedule.
No, I think it's more. I think it's more difficult this year, where the games are placed and when they are and everything like that. I also think, though, that Florida State is better this season. They will be better this season. You hope that you're always hoping that you're going to be able to avoid injuries, but that is just not actually physically possible when you're out there just crushing against each other while you're out there. On every single play, somebody on your team is going to get injured. It's just going to happen. But if you can stay away from the big injuries, if you can stay away from the key injuries, Florida State is going to be a team that is going to be improved, that's going to be better. Again, I'm not saying and I'm not predicting for them 10 wins or a playoff, but I would be predicting 8 or 9 wins in a bowl game. I definitely think that is doable and quite possible. And it's because of the fact that, okay, you say whoever's going to be back there at quarterback. Yeah, DeAndre Francois had a really good season in his first year. James Blackman, he didn't do bad, but it was also overshadowed by they just had a crappy season. I think he ended out the year well, winning the last, 4 or 5 games for him, but they just overall didn't play well. And it was the first, the early games and everything like that. Well, you had to get used to it. You've got Cam Akers. Your wide receiving core, you return 2 guys that had more than 6 catches last season. It's not necessarily promising, but you have to work with it. But it's your offensive line is where that's going to be the question. In the last 2 seasons, they've allowed 32 and 36 sacks respectively. That sucks. No one back there can feel comfortable. Thankfully, you've got 2 guys who can run, but with one of them not being 100%. So this Florida State team is better. They will be better. Defensively, they lose a couple of guys. Defensively, they lose 3 of their starting linebackers. So that's going to be tough. But they return a lot of talent. They return a lot of experience in the secondary and in spots like that. They'll be all right. They just can't run into the injury bug. They cannot do it. They saw what happened last year when they did it, and it was not fun. So keeping guys healthy and having consistency across the board is what's going to help this team. And I do have confidence in Willie Taggart. I think that, no, is he a Nick Saban type of coach? I am not saying that. But I'm also don't want to put him down and just step on the guy and say, how you doing down there, Willie? But this guy is going to be a solid football coach for a team that I think is ready and was ready for a fresh start and a new beginning. And that's what they're getting.
To me, this year, I see the win range for the Seminoles being between 5 to 8. But more realistically, I'm going to say 6 or 7 is where I sit. And that's before bowl game. Okay. So at the very best, I could see them getting 8 regular season wins, but realistically, I don't. I could see them being as bad as 5 regular season wins, but I just don't think they'll be that bad. I think they will be 6-6 or 7-5 heading into their bowl game. And that's what I think Florida State will be this year. And, like, when it comes to the whole Willie Taggart part of it, I look at last year, where last year Willie Taggart goes to an Oregon team. What does he do? 7-5, 4-5 in the conference. It's a different ball game coaching from Western Kentucky and South Florida to coming up and, I'm going to say, coaching with the big boys, to where Willie Taggart's only had really 1 year of experience coaching in the Power Five. And when we think about the Power Fives, maybe it's just you and I, maybe other people think differently. But when I think about the Power Fives, what's usually the conference right now that I rank the lowest of the five?
The Pac-12.
The Pac-12, and that's where he's coming from, where the ACC is probably maybe 2 or 3. Depending on who it is, I think that the top 3 is SEC, Big 12, ACC, and some may even throw the Big 10 in there, depending on who it is. I think the Big 10 might be a little bit more towards 4 right now, but they're leaps and bounds to me over the Pac-12. So you're going to be playing higher competition than you did at Oregon. I think this team quarterback is going to be a big question. Which one do you go with, and do they make the right choice there? Cam Akers, can you lean on him? Can he be better than he was last year? And then ultimately with the schedule, how do you play? And I'm going to call it the death lineup with those road games, because only a few, if you had a few of them that were flipped to home games, I'd be like, all right, we can do this. We can steal. We can win a couple of those. These 2 at home, I can sleep better at night. But as a Florida State fan, I wouldn't be sleeping easy this season, because I would feel like it's going to be a year where it's like, man, we won 7 games, but it didn't really feel like a good season. Like, that's how I could really see this season playing out for FSU.
Well, Willie Taggart, when he started in his first season at Western Kentucky, went 2-10.
It's not going to go 2-10, I'll tell you.
Well, I'm just telling. First season at Western Kentucky, 2-10. First season at South Florida, 2-10. First season at Oregon, 7-5. So at the very worst, they should win as many games as they did last year, and that was a bad FSU team last year. You have what should be an improved FSU team this season with, in my mind, a more difficult schedule. So at the very worst, you should be no worse than what you were last year. That's how I would look at that.
Another thing with Willie Taggart that doesn't sit well with me coming into Florida State is just the teams that he lost to while at Oregon. Never beat, when he went up against a ranked team, never beat a ranked team. Washington State, Stanford, Washington, even Boise State in their bowl game in Las Vegas. And it's like the teams that he did beat, Utah probably being the best one to me. The other one's Arizona, Oregon State, Cal, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Southern Utah. In order to be successful in the ACC, you are going to have to get statement wins, and your team is no longer second in the pecking order right behind Clemson. You're going to have to beat Louisville. You're going to have to beat NC State. Hell, you're even going to have to beat Notre Dame and maybe even a Virginia Tech. Clemson and Miami, to me, are for sure losses, and I feel like, can he win those big games against those big teams who are probably going to be ranked higher than Florida State when the 2 teams meet? Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Just to go off of what you just said, he's working now with completely different talent, completely different guys. I mean, I don't think he had a Cam Akers when he was over at Oregon.
No.
You know, he's got a young quarterback. Well, he's got 2 pretty young quarterbacks who both just have 1 season under their belt. So he's coming into a completely new ball game. It's a completely new ball game. While it might be a little bit more difficult, I think he's probably set up better for it.
And the one thing I will say is, I will, only because I just looked it up, I will debate the Cam Akers part, because he did have Royce Freeman, who was an 1,000-yard rusher and had 16 touchdowns for the Ducks last year. Quality running back, I will say that.
But it's not Cam Akers.
But it has not been.
But it's not Cam Akers.
Technically, it had better numbers than Cam Akers.
Ricky, just shut up and take us out.
But really, it's...
And take us out?
It's the Oregon offense. It's how they run their thing.
Well, let's just be honest. I forgot that Royce Freeman was there.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, he's been there for what, 20 years now? Yeah, now that he finally left, he was there for 20 years.
Yeah, he's like all the guys that go on to, what was it, for Kansas basketball. It's like they never leave. What's his name? Like Perry or something like that. Dude would never leave. He was there for 15 years.
Kind of like, wasn't Mikhailuk there for a while? I don't know. Steve Mikhailuk. That's a question we asked Pat. Pat's our resident Kansas guy. But you guys let us know what you think down below about Florida State this year. How are they going to be? Are they going to be really good? Are they going to be really bad? Are they going to be in the middle? Am I too low on Willie Taggart? Is Brandon right? And I should be a little bit higher on the tag man. Let me know what you think down below in the comment section. But Brandon, let's move on into the next team, and we're looking at the Louisville Cardinals. We're looking at Elville. I hope that's right on the camera. I said, that way? That way? Whatever, one of them's working. I hope that's the right way to throw up the L for Louisville, because it's backwards for me, so hopefully it should be right side for them, but I don't know if there's a weird mirror thing going out the camera. But the big thing we got to talk about to start when it comes to the Louisville Cardinals.
Did they lose somebody?
I think they did. They lost someone pretty big, Brandon. Somebody, a Heisman Trophy winner. Some guy that I used to call Action Jackson.
Getting closer.
Lamar Action Jackson.
Yeah.
No longer on the team. Here's what I want to ask you. Just straight up, not beating around the bush, just going right after it. How is this team going to look in the transition from dual threat Heisman winner Lamar Jackson to maybe a guy that fits Bobby Petrino's passing system a little bit better in pass first, Juwan pass?
Well, not the same. They will not look the same. And when I get into it here in a minute, you'll see that it's really nothing to do with the offensive side of the football.
All right.
Lamar Jackson, yes, he's gone. Where will 80% of the production come from? I mean, this guy was on average racking up 400 yards and 3 touchdowns per game. Where are you going to find a guy who's going to give you that? And now Juwan Pass, who is a guy who's not bad. He's not going to be bad. I mean, he's a guy who, like you said, fits Bobby Petrino's system. He's
yet to throw an interception.
He's a stand in the pocket and pass. He's really not a guy to take off and run. So you're going to lose yards and production that way, but he's a 6'4", 231 guy who's got great size and a gun of an arm. So that's all good. Jalen Smith, Des Fitzpatrick, Seth Dawkins, they're all back. They combined for 2,300 yards and 20 touchdowns last season. But I think the real thing here, again, has nothing to do with the offense. It has everything to do with a defense that is not going to be very good. And what's going to happen now is that you're not going to have Lamar Jackson on the other side to hide those problems on defense. You don't have that guy who is just an absolute stud who can come out, get you 400 yards and 3 touchdowns consistently game after game. Your defense gives up 30 points, but you win by 40. Excuse me, you win 40 to 30, you win by 10. You don't have that guy anymore. You have a good guy, not a great guy. Not someone who I think is going to be elitely great like I think Lamar Jackson was. I'll put it out there. He was an elite player in college. Anyone who argues that maybe didn't watch him. You also have a question at running back, because now you're actually going to use your running back. You finally know that it's Day Williams in the backfield. Whoa, no one knew that before. But this is a guy who might be leaned on a little bit more. And he did well when he was called upon last season, but he's going to have a bigger workload this year because you do not have a quarterback who's going to leave the pocket and run. You just don't. Defensively, like I said, you've now got Brian Van Gorder. Brian Van Gorder as the defensive coordinator. Does everyone remember the last time that we talked about Brian Van Gorder? He was absolutely allowing Notre Dame's defense to take a large dump all over the field. He was fired 4 games into the season
for 2016
because he stunk. And I remember specifically being at the game at Notre Dame. They played Duke. They should have wiped the floor with Duke. They did not. Duke beat them. And that was the demise of Brian Van Gorder. Every time after that was, will he go? Yes, he did go. And I'm not saying that a change of scenery can't help, but that is the last thing in my mind. Mm-hmm. You already didn't have a strong defense to work with. You may not even have a senior. You may not even feature a senior on the defensive side of the football. Brian Van Gorder may not be the best option for that, but Louisville's problems will not come from the offense. They will be coming from the defense, and the problem will be that the offense cannot hide the mistakes.
See, and that's the thing, where the question, it's a questionable hire to bring in Van Gorder, who was fired from Notre Dame in 2016, like you said, 4 games in. To me, the baseline of that, though, is take away the history of him at Notre Dame, of him coming in, what happened. Just the fact that this defense is, last year, the big question was, we're transitioning from coordinator A to coordinator B, and we're not transitioning as fluently as we would have liked. Well, now, if they still had coordinator B, we should be talking about, all right, how are they going to do year 2 of that system with year 2 of that coach? Now that that coordinator leaves, where he's now gone, he's a linebackers coach, I believe, for the Cal Golden Bears. Mm-hmm. The problem is now in 3 years, you're now getting used to another new defensive coordinator. And that, to me, is going to be the problem, where mix that with the no seniors on the defensive side, and that is going to be the epitome of the problems for Louisville. Is if they start to have problems on the defense, who is going to step up and be that leader? Because you don't have, usually you lean on the senior guys to go, you know what, you got to help pull us through this. You got to be the guys that the younger guys lean on and help kind of ease this transition. You're not going to have that. And that's why I feel like Louisville, whether it's going to be successful or not, because there have been cases where this has been successful, there have been cases where this hasn't been successful. I think if Louisville wins a lot of games this year, it's due to, the offense put up how many points? 45, 50 points a game, and they're just outscoring the defense's problems. However, are they going to be able to do that? Because like you said, now you're finally going to, what's the word I'm looking for? Feature the running back. However, the thing that I think that this team will lean on, and whether this will be a crutch or what really pulls this offense through and helps them be successful, is they've got talented wide receivers. They've got a core of these talented wide receivers, and they're just going to plug Juwan Pass in there. So they're going to say, you know what? We're going to put this passing quarterback right here, and we're just going to let him throw all over the field. Yeah, we're going to have a running back, and we're going to use him. We're not going to become one-dimensional, obviously. But is this just going to become the Juwan Pass show, and he's just slinging the ball all over the field, and the reason they're winning games is because him and the offense are putting up, like I said, 45 to 50 every single game.
Well, Ricky, really, it's going to have to be. Mm-hmm. Juwan Pass does have certainly something going in his favor, that an offensive line is very strong. They're very good. They've been good. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be good for Day Williams as well. When you're running behind a good offensive line, it's going to help you to find holes and be better. And again, when he was called upon last year, he found himself to be very solid in the games that he played in. But I really think that he'll be called upon a lot more. But like you mentioned, the wide receivers are very good, very strong. This is a group of guys that they know what they're doing. They're experienced. This is going to be the crutch. You said it. This is going to be the crutch for Louisville. It's going to be them. Mm-hmm. And they cannot get injured. Let's just say that. They cannot get injured. And now flipping back over to the defense again, you've got Dorian Etheridge. He had 83 tackles last year as a freshman that led the defense, a true freshman. He's the only man returning who started all 13 games. That hurts. That hurts bad. I mean, Louisville, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be slotting in a lot of different guys in a lot of different positions.
Is this year going to be, though, a kind of like a soft reboot? Mainly for the defense, because like you said, he's the only one returning all 13, because that's one thing that people are talking about is this isn't the Louisville days of old where it was like, wow, we can lean on these talented guys that we got because Charlie Strong brought them in and everything. They don't have that anymore. They don't have this stockpile of talent that was there when Charlie Strong was bringing them in when he was the coach of the Louisville Cardinals.
Well, here's what I think, is that they've got a soft rebuild offensively. Soft. Very soft. Because most of the guys were already there. You're putting in a new quarterback who, again, he's got the frame, he's got the build to be a good quarterback. And he's got the arm. It's now, will he have a good rapport with his receivers, with his running backs, and everything like that? The hope is, yes, he will. So that's not the biggest problem. It's soft because you still are putting in a new guy who's coming in for a guy who dramatically was better than most quarterbacks in the league and in the ACC. Defensively, it is a hard, full-out rebuild. You lose 3 starters in the secondary. You're leaning on one guy who 83 tackles as a true freshman last year to kind of be your anchor for a defense, who's the only guy who returns, who played all 13 games last season. You just flat out don't have a lot of talent defensively because, why? I think that this is a coaching mistake and flaw on the side of Bobby Petrino because he relied too heavily on the guys that he currently had instead of looking towards the future and seeing what he wasn't going to have in the long term.
Well, it's what we look at.
Short term, he was doing really well.
It's what we look at with coaches.
But in the long term, he was going to be screwed.
It's exactly what we look at with coaches. Who's going to be the best guys for the college game are guys that can kind of juggle the game planning of right now, the recruiting of the future, and kind of do both. Where it's like, hey, I'm focusing on the here and now. I'm looking for the future being in the recruiting game, and who can juggle that back and forth to make sure they're a good team. Because this is a team that I know it's not like an Alabama program, but they were winning, so they should have been able to say, hey, you know what? We put good programs on the field. And the thing I look at is I look at the schedule. And I know we just talked about in the last segment the Florida State team. And I will say the biggest thing that is, if Louisville was playing their game against Florida State in Tallahassee, I would have been saying that the Florida State Seminoles would win that game outright. The biggest game that helps them in that game is that it's at home, it's in Louisville, they don't have to go to Tallahassee to play it. But I look at this schedule, and here are all games that I either think for sure or have a little bit of a doubt that they could lose these games. Here's the ones I'm going to list. Alabama, that's a for sure one. They're not winning that game to open the year. They're going to start 0-1. Then I look at Boston College. That one being on the road with everything, with that defense, with what it could look like this year, I'm going to say Boston College wins that game. At Clemson on November 3rd. Not a chance they beat Clemson this year.
Are you just going with all the road games?
No, that's a key, though. Clemson, Syracuse, and then even the last two, NC State and even Kentucky. So you look at that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'll throw Florida State as a maybe. That's 6 to 7 losses on the schedule that I would not favor at this point Louisville in some of those games. Now, the one against Syracuse, that one's a maybe. They could win that game. However, we talked about Syracuse. They should be a better team. That's going to be at the Carrier Dome. How is that going to be different being in Syracuse if that one was not at home in Louisville? NC State, they should be another really good team this year. I don't care that you're playing them at home. They can come in and beat you. And then Kentucky, they should be a better team. Sean and I looked at them on I think that was the SEC East podcast that we did. And I would even pick them over Louisville right now with what this defense could look like. So, I mean, I look at the schedule, and this could be one where it's like, You lose to Alabama early, you get some 3, 4, maybe 5 wins, depending on how that Florida State game goes. Then it's just the last 4. I could just see LLLL to end the year. Could stumble into a 6-6 bowl game.
Could this Louisville team, at its worst, possibly be the last team in the Atlantic?
No, I still think Syracuse will be last.
Okay.
I think Syracuse will be 3 wins in the conference and be last. They may be tied with a Louisville or a Florida State, but I still think Syracuse will be last in the Atlantic. I don't think Florida State or Louisville will fall below Syracuse.
I think Louisville has so many problems defensively, and by the time that it comes down to that Syracuse game, they may have been able to, you would hope, I mean, it's, you're deep into the season, you're at the end, you would hope that they've had some time to really get things settled and together and gel, but it is going to be a really, I think, rocky and tough road this season for Louisville's defense, and that offense is really going to be leaned upon heavily, and that's not necessarily fair for them. They're going to really have to be, for the most part, flawless. Pass isn't going to be able to throw a lot of interceptions. Turning the football over is going to be a huge thing. They can't do it. They won't be able to do it because their defense will be on the field forever, and they will be worn out, and it will just not go well. I can already picture it.
You know what I can't help but think, and I'm going to change what I said a little bit. How I'm looking at it is because the Georgia Tech, I was like, wait a second, that's not Wake Forest. I had them and Wake Forest kind of flipped because the logos kind of look the same. How I think this season will go down, lost to start the season, then 3 wins, they should win the next 3. Florida State will be a question mark, lose the next 2, beat Wake Forest, lose the next 4 potentially. That's what we could be looking at for Louisville. So that would be, 3, maybe 4 to 5 wins for Louisville. If you throw the Syracuse one in, boom, you've got 6. That's a ball game. So that's what we could be looking at for Louisville. And that, to me, is based solely off of what we could see from this defense. Because offensively, if they beat Syracuse, if they beat, Florida State, it's going to be because the offense came to town and won them those games. It's not going to be because, wow, the defense really held through, and it was a 13-10 standoff.
And you know what's going to happen now?
What?
Now that I've crapped all over their defense, Brian Van Gorder's going to be making them look like just this pristine squad that knows exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what's going to happen now. You do know that, right?
Do you think that, when they brought him in, when it's like, all right, he's the guy, it was a questionable thing. Do you think it was the smart, obviously hindsight's going to be 20/20, and at the end of the year we're going to have a better answer. But right now, was it even the right decision to bring him in based off of what his resume looks like with that big 2016 kind of dark spot with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish sitting there on it? Because I don't know how they hired him with that on it.
I just have such a foul taste in my mouth.
Well, of being a Fighting Irish fan yourself.
Of what it was. What that season was. There were no good things coming from that defense. It was bad. It was very poor. It was very porous. And they weren't just bad against good teams. They were bad against bad teams. Yeah. So that was the whole question mark for me. And that's going to be the question mark this year for Louisville. Okay, people will look at you, and if you are a porous defense against good teams, people will be pissed, but they'll understand. Okay, we got blown out by Clemson, at Clemson. Understandable. But if they allow Virginia to score 40, 50 points against them, that's not okay. That's not okay. The minute you start allowing a lot of points to be scored against the bad teams is the minute that it is getting really hot under the collar for that defensive coordinator and that head coach.
You know what? Going back and looking at the box scores for some of those 4 games, I totally forgot that the first game that season for Notre Dame was the double overtime thriller in Austin, Texas. Because I remember watching that game late and seeing, all right, Charlie Strong throwing out the 16-wheeler formation with swoops in the backfield. And I believe he ran it in to win it, did he not? Is that how they won it, or was that one stopped? They won 50
honestly,
to 47.
I can't remember. I remember the 16-wheeler. They did that multiple times during that game, but I can't remember how it ended.
But like you look at those 4 games, Texas puts 50 up. I know they scored 47, but Texas put 50 up on you. Nevada, you held them to 10, so kudos right there. You held Nevada to 10 points. But then Michigan State, 36, Duke 34 or 38. So it was like, is that a little bit of what we are going to see this year for Louisville, where it's their defense is giving up 35 to 40 points, so the offense better be averaging about 50 points a game?
In my mind, yes, that's exactly what we're going to see. And if I want to go back to the same thing, when you were kind of, I don't want to say that you were bashing Willie Taggart, but you were kind of saying, well, Willie Taggart's not that great. And I was trying to say, well, he's coming from, one spot he had these guys, he's coming and he's going to be having a different group of guys. Well, that is also true for Brian Van Gorder. I think he has worse guys to work with now than he had even at Notre Dame. That's not a good thing, so best of luck.
Well, I mean, not just that. Here's the last thing I'm going to say about it, and it's not just with Gorder. For me, it is also, I look at Bobby Petrino, because you look at it, and Charlie Strong was there from 2010 to 2013. Then Charlie Strong leaves for the Texas job, and he's in Texas 2014. That 2014 year was Petrino's first year on the job. The 2 things that I think of that could be an overlay this year is, first off, is, all right, what are we going to see now? Because basically everyone from that very last Charlie Strong recruiting class came in 2014, played 14, 15, 16, 17. They're gone. Most of them are gone unless a few of them got a 5th year or sat out a year. Most of them are gone, though. So most of these players are now your recruiting class. And number 2 will be, how much of the last 2 years of success was Lamar Jackson and not Bobby Petrino?
And I want to just say that really quickly to go on to that point. I think Bobby Petrino is completely aloof to what is happening on his defense. And you want to know why? Because he had Lamar Jackson and he fell in love with what was going on in the offense. He fell in love with the high scoring. He fell in love with the big playmaking ability, the huge plays, all that good stuff. He fell in love with it and completely threw to the side his ex-girlfriend defense and never looked at them again. And now the ex-girlfriend has come back to haunt him and he is fucked.
Well, this year could be the beginning. I'm just going to say it right now. Put a bookmark, flag this comment. This right here, this season could be the beginning of the end, if not the end. Well, I don't think it'll be the end. I think it'll be the beginning of the end, where because of this season next year, the thing we're talking about in the Louisville preview is, does Bobby Petrino keep his job after the 2019 season? I think that is what this is gearing up for. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. What do you expect from Louisville this year? How good will they be? How bad will they be if you think they're going to be a bad team? And what do you think this team will look like post Lamar Jackson in 2018? Let us know what you think down below in that comment section. And Brandon, let's move on. The next team we're looking at, the Boston College, or if I should say, the Boston College Eagles. That's a really bad Boston accent, but I have to go full on into it every time we're talking about the Bostonians and their teams. And Brandon, we're looking at Boston College. This is a team I was surprised with last year, only because I remember doing the preview for them last year. They were the first ACC preview we did, and I believe I shit on them the entire preview. I believe I said they weren't going to do anything. They'll be back here at the bottom. We'll be talking about them at the beginning of the podcast. Boy, was I wrong, like I usually am. And the Boston College Eagles, 4-4 last year in the conference, 7-6 overall. I'm going to ask you this as a starting point for Boston College. What is one thing that you're looking at this year for the Eagles that will help them build off of the very successful year they had in 2017.
Feed the rock to A.J. Dillon. Feed the rock to A.J. Dillon. This guy is a stud. Look for his name come Heisman time. This guy.
You think so?
Call it now. Call it now. He's going to be in the Heisman running. Guy last year.
Will we see his name over Cam Akers in the Heisman votes?
Over Cam Akers? Yes.
Because technically last year he had a better year than Cam Akers.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I'm going to say yes over Cam Akers. Cam Akers is going to be in the same discussion. But A.J. Dillon, mark it now. 300 attempts last year, over 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns. This guy was the team. This guy was a reason for their success. He's going to continue to be the reason for their success. 300 carries. This guy is a monster. A.J. Dillon, he's going to be the reason. But this is also here's also a thing that could help them. Because A.J. Dillon's, back there behind the quarterback, and because he's so good, Anthony Brown, who is the likely pick at quarterback, had a knee injury, probably not going to be 100%. So if he can't go, they're going to have E.J. Perry, the sophomore, who will probably take the reins. So we're going to probably see a whole lot of handing it off, play action, because they are going to have to. They're not going to just have to be able to drop back and assume they're going to go pass. And they can't just stack the box. They could, but I don't think that's going to go so well for them. So I think we're going to see a lot of that probably early on in the season. But again, A.J. Dillon, with just his running style, just how good he is, what he was able to do for this team last year was so impressive. I look for him to be good again this season. You have to look at a wide receiver group that is very strong, that will continue to be good. All of these guys have played before and have experience. That's going to be very helpful for anybody who's at quarterback. I look at this Boston College team right now, and I could definitely see them getting back to where they were last season. And if you want to get really ballsy, being able to win maybe a game or two more.
My biggest thing, because you brought up A.J. Dillon, my biggest thing with Dillon that I think needs to be one of his biggest improvements this year is the running back that we saw at the end of the year. I'm going to say from maybe Louisville on. So basically from October 14th or from Florida State, October 27th, whichever game you want to throw in there. We have to see that kind of running back from day one. Because last year it was one of those where the NIU game to start the year was the only time he had under double-digit carries. He had 5 carries in that first game for 20 yards, and his longest was a 6-yard run. Then until then, it took him 3 more games. Then on that 4th one, he got his first triple-digit where he went 120. But it was after that Louisville game. Louisville, he has 272. Then he dropped back a sub-100 game against Virginia. Then the rest of the year, it was off to the races. 149, 196, 200 yards, 193. I want to see that kind of a running back from the start of the year. I don't want to see another year where it's like, he's got 60 yards, 43 yards, and then boom, turns it on, kind of like, can't be a slow cooker. You got to be instant, ready to go, put you in the microwave for 10 seconds, you're ready to go that first game. The thing I also like, looking at their schedule, because that's the kind of guy I am in these previews, I jump right ahead into the schedules. And the good thing I like is, yeah, they're going to have the knee injury to kind of think about when it comes to Brown. Let's say worst comes to worst, he's not 100% game one, and they're going to E.J. Perry. The thing I like, because to me in my mind, I am not using E.J. Perry as a long-term answer. To me it is, all right, we're starting him game one, we're setting him up for success, but the plan is to get Anthony Brown out there once he's 100% good to go. The good thing I like looking at their schedule to start the year, UMass should be easy for E.J. Perry. Holy Cross should be a cake for E.J. Perry. Wake Forest could be his first tough game, but at least it's a winnable tough game in the ACC. Then you go to Purdue. I know we're going to talk later this month with one of our lovely patrons, Matthew, who is a Purdue super fan. but I am not yet taking Purdue seriously. And I think that
I don't know how you can't be.
Out of all the teams, I'm not saying it's a for sure walk-in. EJ Perry can win that game. But even if Anthony Brown comes back for that game, I think that that could be a winnable game for Boston College still. And then you got Temple. To me, that's another game where it's like I'm not super scared of that Temple team, no matter what they do to LSU at the earlier part of the season. Or that was Troy, pardon me, that beat LSU. I'm getting my T's messed up here. But
Troy.
With Temple, I still think Purdue and Wake Forest, I'm going to throw the as out there. At worst, I'm sitting there 3-2. They could still be 5-0 after their first 5. And my goal is, all right, we got to get Anthony Brown back by that October 6th game, because then if EJ Perry goes into the NC States, the Miamis, the Virginia Techs, then I get a little worried as a Boston College fan. I got to have Anthony Brown back by October 6th. Ideally, it would be let's have him back by Purdue on the 22nd of September or by Temple on the 29th.
You know, I think that you look at how this could go, and you're really, I mean, truly, you're really going to want to hope, as your best case scenario, 5-0, you're going to really have to start praying right now, if you're Boston College, that you do start 5-0, because you have on the road at NC State, you have Louisville, whatever, Miami at home, on the road at Virginia Tech, at home versus Clemson. You do not have a fun stretch of games right there from, what is it, October 6th until November 10th. You do not have a very fun stretch of games. Four of those games in there are very difficult games. That's going to be the challenge. So if you do not start off 5-0 and you do start out 3-2 and you lose, then let's say 4 of those 5 games, you're sitting at 3-6. You're sitting at 3-6 with just 2 games to go. On the road at Florida State, at home against Syracuse. Let's say you win 1, you lose 1. You end up, what are you then? 4-7?
I think so.
I mean,
right
that's
around there.
4-7, 5-7. Something. I mean, so it could get really tough for Boston College in the middle of the season, and that's where you want to have your quarterback healthy. A.J. Dillon, you're going to want him to continue to be doing what he did at the end of last season, and why I believe that he's going to be a Heisman candidate this year. You need all of your wide receivers to be able to step up and be as good as they can be, and then you need your defense, which you're going to have a very strong front 7. You need them to really be solid. You need them to be very, very solid. You need, again, like we talked about with Louisville, you need your defense to be really good against the bad teams. And then you need them to rise above for the good teams. So Zach Allen will be the anchor up front. He was really solid last year. He had 100 tackles, 4 sacks, an interception, and 3 passes defended. This is a guy who's going to absolutely be a beast, a monster out there for them this year. And they're going to need him. They're going to need him. They lost some good guys to the draft. We know Derwin James. He's no longer there. No, excuse me. That's the wrong team. I'm talking Florida State. So, no, who'd they lose? They lost Harold Landry. Pardon me, not Derwin James. Harold Landry. So they lost Harold Landry, a good, a really good guy there.
Similar colors, though. Florida State and Boston College.
That's why I started to think, and I'm like, no, that's the wrong maroon color. But what I'm saying is that they did lose a viable piece on the defensive side. And then you look at the linebackers. They were very much plagued by injury last season. So we didn't, I don't think, get a good look at them there. You take the injury away and we'll see what we're able to get. This is a team who in the secondary has a guy at Lucas Dennis, who is a defensive back, had 83 tackles and 7 interceptions last year. You've got to expect his senior season, his senior campaign is going to be his breakout year. 7 interceptions and 83 tackles, with many of those interceptions coming in the biggest games. So this team as opposed to the last one we talked about, does not seem to be in defensive turmoil. In fact, they actually look to be having a lot of really strong areas defensively. That's going to help them. That's why, if you look at the first 5 games, I think it could be realistic to say that they go 5-0. Because they have an offense that's pretty good, minus a quarterback situation that we're unsure of right now.
Let's say 5-0.
Then you have a defense that's going to be able to, I think, keep you in any of those games.
I was going to say, let's say 5-0 or 4-1 with the Purdue game being maybe the loss. Nothing, no offense to Wake Forest, but I think this Boston College team is like, here's the problem with the Boston College Eagles this year, where you're going to walk into this season going, man, this is probably one of the best teams that we're going to put on the field for Steve Adazio. However, I just look at the schedule. Not only is Wake Forest better this year, well, better last year, should carry over a little bit into this year. You get them on the road. You play Purdue. Purdue's a more talented team this year. Should not be a laughingstock team in the Big Ten like they usually are. It's probably just going to be my Illini all alone with Rutgers, laughing it up in the Big Ten. I'll cry over that all season. Not only do you get NC State on the road this year, not only do you have to go to Tallahassee this year, which I still think they can win that game. Yes, you get Clemson at home. Yeah, you get Louisville at home. Louisville's a lot different. We just talked about them. The biggest thing that I sit there, and when this schedule was revealed, if I was a Boston College fan or coach, this is immediately what I would do. For audio listeners, I'll describe it after I do it. But for everyone watching on YouTube, this is what I would have done once the schedule was revealed to me. And just put my head in my hands, looking at who we have to play from the other side of the ACC. We get the top 2 teams, arguably, from the other side. We get to play Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, and then we got to play, it doesn't matter where you play the Hurricanes this year. They're going to play you tough at home.
And
they'll play you tough on the road.
To pour it on even more, you have to play
overseas.
them back-to-back. You play at home against Miami on October 26th, and then on the road at Virginia Tech on November 3rd, and then back home to play a very tough Clemson team.
This year will probably be the year where it's like, man, we got a really good team on paper. Woo, let's go. What is going on with our schedule this year? Schedule makers did not want to do Boston College any favors, and that's why it's one of those where, yes, the fans are going to walk in going, it's okay, we got confidence, we'll walk in there, we can do this, but I think at the end of the year, the record will show where it's like, man, especially with those 3 games, maybe NC State, it's like, you're looking there with maybe 4 losses to where it's like, man, with this team, what they have on paper, this team should not have had as many losses as they had this year.
But are we jumping to conclusions, too quickly and saying, oh gosh, well, NC State was really good last year, and Miami and Virginia Tech were both good last year, and most likely will probably be good this year. Well, Boston College doesn't have a chance. Boston College is good, but they don't have a chance. Are we jumping too quickly to say that because the other teams last year were better and they ended up better on paper in terms of their record? Are we not giving Boston College the chance for that? I mean,
I'm going to say yes and no.
And really quickly, who's to say that Boston College does not come out and absolutely show them one hell of a game, and Boston College ends up winning?
Here's the second point to my 2-point system going here. This year for Boston College, the most important thing this year will be making that turn of basically, we made the step last year. We're no longer last place. We were a 7-6 team, 4-4 in the conference. This year will show, are we ready to make that turn? Is Boston College ready to make the turn to leap up into the upper echelon of the ACC, where we look at a Clemson, we look kind of like how last year when we looked at this division, we looked at Clemson, Louisville, Florida State, kings of the mountaintop. Those 3 are fighting it off. This year,
and look where Florida State ended
exactly.
up.
But this year for the Atlantic, it's probably Clemson, NC State, and then there's no real third team. It's really Clemson's to win. NC State's probably going to be right there, and those are the top two dogs that we have. Yeah, and the other side, like, we might be saying, like, I'm not going to say that Boston College doesn't have a chance to maybe upset the Hokies or maybe upset the Hurricanes, but if you're going to put a gun to my head and say Ricky wins or losses, I'm putting L's from October 26th, November 3rd, and November 10th. That's just what I'm doing, because right now I would put my money on Miami, Virginia Tech, and Clemson up against Boston College. I would even do so for NC State at this point. But this will be the year where Boston College knows what kind of a team they have, that this is one of the best teams that they've had basically since 2013, maybe even longer for Boston College fans. And they're going to look at it and go, all right, this is the year where we show, are we ready to make that turn to say we are here to be one of the big boys at the ACC table?
The strength of the defense for BC is going to be that front seven. If that front seven is able to make some noise and disrupt the quarterbacks for Miami, NC State, Virginia Tech, and they come to play and they get in that backfield and they cause chaos and disrupt a lot of passes, then all of a sudden, Boston College is in that game. And it's not such a one-sided fest that a lot of people might look at and see right now on the schedule. As many times as we want to sit here, especially in the previews, it's very easy to see it because we're going off of a lot of what we saw last year because we haven't seen anything this year yet.
And what we're excited about coming into this year, like you were saying with A.J. Dillon.
Exactly. But then it gets to the game and you're going, this is not what I planned out.
Jeez, I can't wait for this season.
It's fun.
Just can't wait.
It's fun. It's going to be great.
And here's what I'm kind of thinking in my head, wins and losses for BC. I'm going to say 6, 7, or 8 wins. If they are ready to turn the corner, we're looking at an 8-win team. And if it's an 8-win team, I'm thinking their only losses are against, let's say with 8, they would have 4 losses. So I'm going to say if they win 8 games, they lost against Clemson, the Hokies, the Hurricanes, and the Wolfpack. If they have 5 wins or 7 wins, add a Purdue loss. If they have 6 wins, add a Wake Forest loss. But those are the only 6 games I can see on the schedule this Boston College team losing this year. And I know Florida State fans are going to stand up and go, whoa, this game's in Tallahassee. Don't count us out. And when we get to November 17th, that might be a different story. But at this point, I like this team a lot better than I do Florida State. The only question is, what are you going to do? There are those 6 games that I just highlighted. What are you going to do against Clemson, Virginia Tech, Miami, NC State, and then Purdue and Wake Forest? And Purdue and Wake Forest are only because they may not have Anthony Brown. We don't know exactly when he is going to come back. I was looking, there was an article that was saying that he does feel better and a return could be sooner rather than later, but we don't know how long that knee injury is going to drag into the season. And if he does miss any games, I could see that knee injury. I mean, maybe that's just me because I like stories. Could you imagine his first game back against the team he injured his knee against last year? Boom, he comes back NC State, and that's the team he's got to play. That would just be the storyline in my head, but that's the only reason why I'm throwing Wake Forest and Purdue in there, mostly Wake Forest, is because they may not have Anthony Brown for that game.
I think Boston College is poised for one of their best seasons in quite some time. And again, I think that if everything goes right, 8 wins is certainly attainable.
Well, this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below for the Boston College Eagles this year. How many games do you think they'll win? And I want to take the question that Brandon asked me and kind of throw it on to you guys of, are we being too, how did you put it? When it was with the Miami, Virginia Tech, Clemson games.
Basically, are we jumping to conclusions?
That's it.
Too quickly to say that Boston College is going to they're going to flat out not win those games.
Should we be giving them more of a chance? Well, especially on my side. Should I be giving them more of a chance in the Clemson, Virginia Tech, Miami, NC State game? Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section. And Brandon, let's move on into that next team. And Demon Deacons fans, if you're coming on to Listen in Full podcast, apologize if I pissed you off during that Boston College segment.
Yeah, I hope you came back.
Because most of them were probably like, we're going to be Boston College. Don't worry about that. But we're going to look at the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, Brandon, for the 2018 season. And the first question I want to ask you has to do with the quarterback situation. Because you've got John Wolford. He's gone. And then you're like, all right, so Kendall Hinton is going to be the guy, but he's not going to be there the first three. Well, he's not going to be playing the first 3 games due to violating team rules. And he's also a guy that has a bit of an injury history, usually with the good old knee. We've talked about knee injuries, I feel like, enough on this podcast. But the big question is, what is going to happen with the quarterback situation, mainly because it's like, yes, Hinton's going to be the guy, but will he be the guy after those first 3 games, which will be at Tulane versus Towson, and then that Boston College game that we had just talked about moments ago. So let me ask you this. What's going to happen? We'll start with the quarterbacks. What's happening with the QBs with Wake Forest this year?
Well, I think that's going to be the biggest question right now for Wake Forest, and which is why I think it is hard to say, and now people will probably be upset with me. Mm-hmm. I think it is hard to say that with certainty Wake Forest would be able to get that win over Boston College, because right now they're losing the quarterback that probably could have given them the win over Boston College and John Wolford, and they're moving to a guy in Kendall Hinton who is more of a runner anyways. But he's a guy who, like you said, injury history. You're out 3 games for violating team rules. If and when you do come back, how quickly do you find your rhythm? How quickly do you really get immersed into the offense and get that rapport with the receivers and feel comfortable in the pocket? How long does that take? A quarter? A half? A game? 2 games? How long is that going to be? Thankfully, the O-line returns all 5 starters, 3 that earn all ACC honors, so that's a huge plus for Wake Forest. That's going to be big for them and the quarterback, but it's going to be even bigger for the running backs. And they've got 3 good ones, 3 really dynamic guys. They've got a speedster, a bruiser, and a guy who's just kind of the all-purpose. And that's going to be very, very helpful for them. And being able to run behind that brick wall of an offensive line is certainly going to be good for them. But again, everything's kind of going back to the quarterback. Everything's going back to the quarterback. You want to be able to have your best guy in there. But you also want to know that you can depend on him in terms of, you violate team rules, and we don't know what it was that he violated in terms of the rule.
He's out for
but
3
it doesn't
games.
matter. You're out for 3 games, and what does that mean? You're not going to be playing. It means you're not helping your team win games, even though they're not against Clemson, they're not against it. But it doesn't matter.
I think it does matter. And the only reason why I'm going to say that is when it comes to the games Hinton will not be playing, let's be completely honest, they'll probably go 2-1. They'll probably still beat Tulane. They'll probably still beat Towson. Boston College is basically the only game that becomes probably a flip now with Hinston being out. The thing, though, that it affects is we assume that Hinston will be then back September 22nd, his first game. You get thrown to the Wolves, basically. You're playing Notre Dame, who, yeah, they might not be the best team in college football, but still, they're a tough team to play right away. And then it's like you get a Rice game in there, and then boom, right away, Clemson, Florida State. Just boom, boom, right away. And that Florida State game is in Tallahassee. So it's like, for me, with you not being able to play those first 3 games, what are we going to see? Are we going to see some hiccup in the Notre Dame game? Is 2 games, Notre Dame and Rice, enough for you to be ready, rearing to go against when Clemson comes to town? Because we know how good Clemson will probably be this year. I doubt them even without Deshaun Watson, and they still make the playoff and still go 12-2 last year. Is 2 games going to be enough to get ready for that? And are you even going to be, let's be completely honest, is Hinton going to be even enough to give the Demon Deacons an edge over Clemson? Spoiler alert, he's probably not. Clemson wins that game anyway. So, I mean, for me, yeah, it could be 2-1, but then Notre Dame could be a question. All right, now you're 2-2. Rice, I'll give you a win there, 3-2. But then, boom, boom, you could be right back down to 3-4 by the time you get to that Louisville game on Halloween weekend.
I just want to go back to something that you kind of said at the beginning. You said you don't think that it matters that he's out for those 3 games.
No, I said I think it does.
It does?
It does.
Okay.
It does matter because if he was starting day 1, I would feel a little, even though I would still say Clemson wins the game, I would feel a little bit more confident in his ability come Clemson, Florida State. More so Florida State, because he would have 2, 3, 4, 5 games to get into a rhythm where, I'm going to be honest, 2 games might not be enough to get into as good of a rhythm as you want when you're going to go play Clemson that 3rd game.
Okay, because I thought you had said that it doesn't matter, and I was going to say it absolutely does matter because you're not there for your teammates and you're letting your teammates down for the first 3 games, even if they're not all huge games
even if you're still going to go 2-1 in those
exactly.
games.
But I want to just turn things over now to the defense, where I think we may be looking at another team where defense is going to be something to wait on and see where they end up being at. So you look at an offensive line that's going to be really good. You look at a defensive line that should be really good. You look at a linebacking position that's probably going to be of greatest concern. All the starters are gone. The returners are shaky at best. That's going to be a problem. And then over the last 6 games of the season, Wake Forest allowed an average of 380 passing yards per game. The secondary has got to be cleaned up. They lost Jesse Bates, one of their safeties. He went to the NFL early. And then they're going to be moving a receiver, Chuck Wade, into Bates' spot and hope that he's going to be able to get the job done.
Can I ask you this?
It's worked out before, but that's a little shaky.
Let me ask you this when it comes to the defense. So last year, the defense had a new coordinator in Jay Chauvel, and then 2 new assistants come in. And here's a quote from Chauvel, and I'm going to ask you what you think about this. He said, "At times, the new coaches weren't on the same page. All these guys have had a year. We've looked at it. We see our mistakes." Put yourself in the shoes of a Wake Forest Demon Deacon fan. Hearing that from your defensive coordinator heading into this year after the defense took a step back last year, does that quote ensue confidence in you? Because for me, it does not. Does not ensue, we saw our mistakes. We'll be better. It's like, it doesn't do enough for me. I don't know what I'd be expecting him to say, but just saying like, yeah, we looked at it. There were mistakes. It was like, yeah, no shit, there were mistakes. I could have seen them too. Like, what do you think of those comments?
Well, I think that it certainly makes sense when he says that they weren't on the same page because of the fact that you had the last 6 games where you gave up 380 passing yards a game. Yeah, I don't think you were on the same page. You are completely right. Thank you for letting us know now after we already knew it.
I hope those pages have page numbers this year.
Yeah. But you know what I think? For me, if I'm a Demon Deacon fan, I'm pissed because it's like, how are you not on the same page? Why were you not on the same page? Why didn't you correct that then and there during the season? But I am somewhat comforted to believe that that will not happen again this season. So I'm pissed because it happened, but I'm moving on because they're telling me that they've worked out the kinks, they've worked out the issues, they've figured out where the mistakes are, they're correcting them, and they should be better this year. They should have those fixed. Now,
here's what I'm looking at. And for me, the Demon Deacons will probably, like, I know the defense is, I'm just going to say it, I know the defense is bad, and it's not really a bright
Not Louisville
spot.
bad.
Not Louisville bad. But, and I know you're going to have all the questions that we've talked about with the quarterback. However, I look at this schedule, and I'm kind of in my head kind of thinking about, all right, what kind of a win range they could be between. I could see them being the same as they were last year. Like a 8-4, 7-5 kind of a team. Because right now I was looking through, I'm like, all right, where are my losses going to come? Right now, you're not going to have Hinton for the Boston College game. I like Boston College better on paper than I like Wake Forest. I'm going to give that game to Boston College. Although Wake Forest went into Boston College last year and got that win, I think the Eagles get their revenge at Wake Forest this year. So that's loss number one. I think Hinton's not going to look very good in his first game back. I think Notre Dame gets the win over the Demon Deacons. That's loss number 2. Clemson will be loss 3. Florida State will be loss 4. NC State will be loss 5. Now, here's where the range comes from. 5 is your absolute best in my mind. 7-5 is your absolute best. However, I could see this team between 7-5 and maybe 5-6, with those 2 up in the air games being 2 of 3. Syracuse, Pitt, and Duke. 1, 2 of those games, maybe none of those games, but maybe 1 or 2 of those games, Syracuse is the real one I'm looking at. Just something about one of those 3 games just kind of says to me, yeah, the Demon Deacons might drop 1 or 2 of those 3 to finish maybe 2-2 or 1-3 in their last 4 games to end the season.
I see this team as a 6 or 7 win team. 6 or 7. I see a win against Tulane, Towson, Rice, probably Louisville, even though it's on the road. Most likely Syracuse, Pitt, and Duke.
7 wins.
7 wins.
So you would have them 7-5.
That's their cap, though, for me. Mm-hmm. That's how many I believe that they could win.
Yeah.
Could they also be a 6-6? Mm-hmm. I could also see that too. I don't see this team being as good as it was last year.
No,
because no matter what the quarterback does, whoever the quarterback is, they're not going to be John Wolford. They're not. They're not going to throw for 3,100 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 6 picks. They're not going to be that efficient. They're not going to be that consistent. I don't see that. I think they're taking a definite step back at the quarterback position. They're not even sure who they're going to go with. They don't even know who will be their quarterback at the end of the season.
If I had to put my money on, and this is kind of a question that you asked me with, I think it was the Boston College preview that we did. Maybe it was the Louisville, but I think it was the Boston College where you asked me this. Now that we're getting more and more through this side of the division, the picture kind of becomes more clear in your head.
Yeah.
And for me, if I had to put my money on what the order would look like in this division at the end of the year, Clemson number 1, NC State number 2, Boston College number 3, Florida State number 4, Wake Forest, Louisville, Syracuse. That's what I would maybe go with. However, the Florida State to Louisville, Florida State, Wake Forest, and Louisville might be more fluid. Those 3 teams will be close, maybe like tied, the same record, maybe 4-4, 3-5, and then Syracuse will be below them with the top 3, Boston College being like, I don't know, 5-3, then NC State being 6-2, Clemson being 7-1. Like, that's where I see Wake Forest being this year, where you're no longer the 3rd best in the ACC. You're more towards that bottom half, closer to the Louisville and Syracuse this year at the bottom?
I could see you being right. I don't see Wake Forest being the number 3 team this year. I think they owed a lot of that, again, to their offensive production from last season. And while they do return some good running backs and, I think some solid receivers, and a very good offensive line, they're looking at a couple of question marks defensively once you go past the defensive line. And that quarterback, it's looming. It's looming a little too much for me right now. And there's no definitive answer on who it's going to be and when.
The one guy,
and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that spot.
The one thing I'll ask you that we didn't ask, maybe it's not even important to ask this question, but with you, let's just say for the first 3 games, while Hinton is out, do you think it's going to be a Jamie Newman who had some passes last year, or will it be a Sam Hartman?
Either one. I think it's a toss-up. I mean, I don't see...
Basically, it doesn't matter who plays these games. We'll go 2-1. We'll beat Tulane. We'll beat Towson. We'll lose to Boston College.
Well, most likely, the thought is that you will beat Tulane and Towson.
Mm-hmm. They're not guarantees, but...
No game is a guarantee unless it's Mercer. And Alabama's playing them, but that's
or the Citadel.
It's the only guarantee game I'll give anybody. But you should win those 2 games. You should be 2-0, and then Boston College. Boston College is a toss up. It's still early in the season for both teams. I
just like Boston College better on paper.
Yeah, I mean, so do I. But again, still early in the season. Teams are working out their kinks. You just don't know. I mean, we saw Clemson last year in their 7th or 8th game, and that was not early in the season necessarily. So they lose to Syracuse on the road, 27-24. So anything could happen, but again, with whether it's Newman, whether it's Hartman, that's a toss-up for me. There's not one over the other that I'm like, oh gosh, you got to put this guy in for sure. The guy they probably want in there is Kendall Hinton, but right now he's not 100%. He's out for the first 3 games, so they don't have that option.
Any final thoughts on Wake Forest before we move into the top 2 dogs in this division? And we will move on. So we're going to throw the question on to you guys, Wake Forest fans. What do you guys think for your Demon Deacons this season? Will it be a good season? Will it be a bad season? Are we just 2 Debbie Downers on the Wake Forest Demon Deacons for 2018? Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section. And Brandon, moving on into the next team we're taking a look at is the NC State Wolfpack. Too sweet. And the first question I'm going to ask you is plain and simple for this one. Is this team going to challenge Clemson for the top of the Atlantic Division this year? Will they challenge Clemson?
They're going to try.
They were only 1 game behind Clemson last year, and they returned quite a few pieces.
They do.
The main one that they lost is Bradley Chubb, who is no longer in North Carolina. He's now in Denver, playing with some higher altitude, but really they returned some key pieces that could help them challenge for number 1 in the division.
Yeah, they do. They did lose some pieces, but they still have a lot of guys intact. I mean, they still have their quarterback, Ryan Finley. He's returning again for a 6th season in college. God bless him. He's doing it right. 3,500 yards and 17 touchdowns to only 6 picks last season. His completion percentage of 65.1%. That's impressive. They returned 3 wide receivers, 3 offensive linemen. They're really looking at a pretty still very strong offense. Defensively, they lose 8 guys. Again, like you said, one of them being the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, Bradley Chubb. Here's the thing. They were 26th against the run last season. They need to keep that about where it is right now. They're 104th against the pass. So that's where things are going to have to get better in the secondary. They're going to need to be better there. But the thing I think is going to come back to the consistency of this team and what they're going to be able to bring and how well Ryan Finley is going to work with this wide receiving core. And then with Reggie Gillespie, he's in there. If he can have an injury-free season, this is a guy who can hit 1,000 yards. I think that with everything that I just mentioned there and a little quick sum up This is a team that can challenge Clemson. While the task is a tough one. I mean, when we get to Clemson next, we're going to see that they are good. They are good. But I think that NC State and the Wolfpack, I think they're also a very strong team.
The thing I love about this Clemson schedule, as I'm looking at it,
this NC State schedule?
NC State schedule. I was clicking on Clemson to see if they don't have to. Actually, I'm going to say the same thing when we get to Clemson, too. You know what's the best part about it? Don't have to see Miami. Don't have to see Virginia Tech. And if I see any of them, it's because I beat Clemson on October 20th, and I'm going to the ACC title game, baby. Like, that is the best part about this, because we talk about Finley, but this wide receiver group that he is on record saying, and this is a quote from Athlon Sports, where they say, he said, there's no doubt we have the best receiving core in the ACC.
Yeah.
So, to me, there's basically how this is going to go down in the Atlantic this year is, now I know Clemson fans are going to be like, well, we have an offense too. But for me, in my mind, it is going to be, I cannot wait until October 20th because it will be the great offense of the ACC and NC State against probably the best Clemson defense we have seen for some time in Clemson. And I can't wait for that game at Clemson because it is going to be great defense on one end, great offense on the other. Which team is going to prevail? Last year for NC State, they only had 3 losses all year. You lose to Notre Dame, you lose to Wake Forest, you lose to Clemson. This year, you don't have to worry about that Wake Forest loss. There's only 2 teams on the schedule that I could see beating NC State. September 15th, when they host the West Virginia Mountaineers, that's going to be a very good Mountaineer team that Sean and I, when we previewed the top half of the Big 12 last week, West Virginia was a team that I looked at as could be a sneaky team in the Big 12 to finish maybe top 3, maybe even sneak up there to be a sleeper team to kind of get into the top 2, even though I still think it'll be between OU, Texas, and TCU. And then Clemson. Those are the only 2 games on the schedule. I don't see anyone else in the... Now, I know like the Boston College, I'll give a shot. Syracuse, if they play as well as they did last year against Clemson, that game is going to be at Syracuse. So any given Saturday, any given Sunday, however you want to say it, everyone has a puncher's chance. But those are the only 2 games that I see them losing because I look at 2 of the games that they're playing from the Coastal. And if I am NC State, I am hugging the schedule makers and I am giving them a big old fat kiss on the forehead because you didn't give me the Miami Hurricanes. You didn't give me the Virginia Tech Hokies. You gave me the Virginia Cavaliers. Thank you. And you gave me the North Carolina Tar Heels. Thank you again. So, I mean, this team, I think that this schedule is going to come down to, do you beat West Virginia? Doesn't matter really because it could be like a OU kind of OSU game where it's like, oh, you lost that one, but you won everything else when it comes to the playoffs. That's the only thing that loss would really matter in. And then really it comes down to all they have to do, take care of business, win on October 20th, and this team's playing either against Virginia Tech or Miami for the ACC title and possibly a playoff berth.
Yeah, I think this team has a lot to be really excited about. They return again a lot of players on the offensive side. You have your quarterback. Which, when you have your quarterback already and you don't have any question marks,
it's the most important position on the field.
So important. It's so important for the skill and ability. It's important for the leadership, and they have that, and this guy has all of that. You have your top receivers. You've got Kelvin Harmon, 69 catches last year, over 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. Add onto those touchdowns, get it to about 1,100, 1,200 yards. We're talking about a great season. He had a good season this past year. He could have a great season. Junior Jacoby Myers. This guy's going to be a deep ball threat. He had 63 catches, 727 yards, 5 touchdowns last year. Add on to that. Again, you keep Reggie Gillespie healthy. If he stays healthy, he gets 1,000 yards. You're looking at another piece who's going to be very, very important to this offense. Add in 4-star recruit Ricky Pearson. It looks like Person. I tried to look up videos to say it. They didn't say it. So, yeah, I know. It's on me.
NC State fans, let us know, baby. Let us know.
Ricky, he's a guy who's got great speed and big playability.
You know he's great because he's got my first name.
Yes. Yes. I wonder if his alter ego is Dick as well.
Maybe.
It could be. It could be. But I think that they've got the playmakers offensively. I'm not worried about them offensively. And I shouldn't say that I'm worried at all about them defensively either. And I don't want to say at all.
It always hurts when you lose the best player in the conference to the NFL draft.
It does.
A guy that was so good that the team that drafted him at 4 or 5, the defensive coordinator's chin hit the floor when the team at number 1 didn't draft him.
Well, here I'll say this. Like I mentioned earlier, they were 104th against the pass last year. They also were plagued by injuries and inexperience. They now have a year under their belt. The guy should be healthy. They should be much better. They should be much better. They've got Nick McLeod, who's going to be returning. They also get a transfer from Tennessee and Stephen Griffin, who's going to help out back there in the secondary as well. I don't see these guys being as bad as they were in terms of ranking last year on defense against the pass. It really does take a toll on you when you have injuries, and then you add that to inexperience. I think we look for them to take a leap this year, and with that leap, maybe they are putting a little bit more pressure on Clemson because what has Clemson showed the last 2 seasons? They are going to be upset by someone.
Yeah, and the big thing, the only thing looking at their schedule that could probably be like great, we didn't get everything in our favor, is that Clemson game is in Death Valley. Yeah. It's on the road at Clemson. It is one of the hardest places to not only win a football game, but play a football game.
Death Valley?
Yeah, them and LSU are both Death Valley. I know. It feels weird saying because I always think of LSU first, but yeah, it's Death Valley as well.
I always wanted to call them Happy Valley.
You run down the hill, you touch the stone,
I knew
hill.
Death Valley was LSU, but I guess I wasn't so... You shocked me a little bit when you said that about Clemson.
I want to say it's Death Valley. Let me look it up just to make sure. Brandon keeping me on my toes that I'm right. I could be right. I could be wrong. I'll look it up in a second. But I mean, this team, these are the last 2 that are the easiest previews for me because I don't think Clemson and NC State are going to lose many games. The one loss I forgot to mention from last year was South Carolina, and the only reason I forget to mention that one is because I remember watching that game because I was visiting a friend in Wisconsin, and we were out to eat, and it was on the television set, and I remember watching it. I was the only one at the table watching it because the other people that I was with were more of the nerd variety and not the sports fan variety. It's more like going out to lunch with Johnny. Johnny's not going to look at a football game or a basketball game. Sports with a huge exclamation point was basically the type of friends I was with. So I'm the only one watching this. And there was a play late in that game, a 4th down where I believe they ran it or Finley quarterback sneaked it. They converted, but they didn't get it. It was a bullshit call, and I remember bitching about it at the table to people that knew nothing of what I was bitching about. But that's why that one kind of squeaks by because you shouldn't have lost that game in my mind, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to play them this year. And for me, the only non-conference game that could be a loss is that West Virginia game. Other than that, it's the Clemson game. Like, Boston College, I get. They're better on paper. I don't think they'll beat NC State. Florida State, Seminole fans will want to tell me, yeah, we're going to upset them. I don't think that happens. Wake Forest, we beat them last year. You're not the same team. You're not the same offense that you were last year. So for me, I feel like this division comes down to, and really it never does, but in my mind, I'm going to say it again, it comes down to October 20th. Whoever wins that football game will most likely be the one to represent the ACC Atlantic in the ACC title game and will have the best shot to win a winner-take-all to possibly make the playoff out of the Power 5 teams.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why that game at Clemson is going to be very important. And you're right, it is Death Valley. Happy Valley is Penn State. I don't know how I got that confused. But that is going to be the number one game. And the reason being is because of what you said. Mm-hmm. They could easily, NC State could easily beat West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And if that happens, there is a good argument that could be made that they beat everyone else on their schedule, mm-hmm. and then you come to that Clemson game. And the same is probably going to be said when you look at Clemson's schedule. And I know that Clemson is next, but you look at Clemson's schedule, I won't say it out loud, mm-hmm. but you look at it and you could see, yeah, the game that most people are going to be looking at and circling is NC State. Most people. Mm-hmm. Some people may be looking at game 2. But we'll talk about that more when we get to it. Yeah. But it makes sense. And that's why what you say has a lot of weight to it. Mm-hmm. Because it really is going to come down, and the fate of the Atlantic could really be decided by one game.
The big thing that I love about NC State over Clemson, and I know that like these two are so closely linked that it's like you kind of don't want to give anything away of what we're going to end the podcast with. But with NC State, I'll say it this way. The thing I love most about them is everything that they return. Like, I know that we talked about, I can't even remember, they're all kind of mushing together at this point. Oh, it was Louisville. I know it's kind of the same thing with Louisville. Oh, this one's a little different because they returned their quarterback. Juwan Pass wasn't the starter last year, but they returned their starting quarterback. They return their receiving core. Yet it's not like, oh man, but that defense is a bunch of, basically a bag of crap, like we said with Louisville. Like, they are going to have a really good offense, and the defense, yeah, they're going to have to replace, 7 or 8 players, but they're going to replace those players. And to me, I think the question will come down to, when it comes down to NC State Clemson, is for NC State, the question will be, how do they replace those defensive starters and those defensive players that are now gone, compared to Clemson, which basically, and we're going to get into this in a second, basically Trevor Lawrence versus Kelly Bryant. The quarterback position is yet another question. It's always been a question since Deshaun Watson left. So in that game, which is going to be the bigger question, which is going to be the weakest link, the defense that NC State has to replace, or the quarterback question that Clemson may have this year? That's what ultimately, in the end, could decide the ACC and the ACC Atlantic.
Yeah, I think you're completely right, and I think that with what you said, we're looking at, with NC State, a lot of returners, mm-hmm. and a lot of returners offensively. And what you said with Clemson, again, like you said, we don't really want to get into it too much because that's the next one, but they are so close together here. It's going to be, I guess I could say it's going to be a quarterback battle, but I don't think it's going to be a quarterback battle for long, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But it's going to be two very good teams battling it out in what will hopefully and most likely be a very good, close game.
Last thing I'll ask you for NC State on their side, how do you see their wins and losses panning out? Because for me, the way I'm going to go is probably safe, even though I'm probably going to be rooting for them more so than Clemson. I think they lose to Clemson, and that's the only game they lose all year. They lose one game all year, and I will even throw this into the pot. If Clemson makes it to the ACC title game, and God forbid a team not Virginia Tech or Miami makes it to that ACC title game, and then Clemson loses, we will then be talking about NC State should be getting into the playoff, much like we saw with the Big Ten a couple years ago, but I don't think that'll happen. I just think it'll be one loss. They'll get a New Year's Six bowl game, and they'll probably watch Clemson at that point go to the playoff.
Unfortunately, I am agreeing with what you are saying. I think they'll also be 11-1, and I think Clemson will be the team that they lose to.
I mean, West Virginia, I almost want to give, I want to give them a puncher's chance, but the thing
because of Will Grier?
He's the reason why I kind of go back a little bit, because I like Finley more than Grier, and Grier's got an injury history. Like, one wrong hit in that game, and he's Dunzo out of that game, and then NC State carries off with the win. So, I mean, that's why with them, I'm going to give the ball to NC State. But any final thoughts before we move on into those Tigres?
Let's hit the Tigres.
This is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section about the NC State Wolfpack. Will they win the ACC? Will they beat Clemson? How well or how good will their season be this year? Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. And Brandon, let's finish the podcast taking a look at the incumbent champions of the ACC from last year. The reigning champions in the ACC from last year, the Clemson Tigers. And the first question I want to ask you about Clemson has to do with their quarterbacks. We talked about them last year. I wasn't too high on him last year. And Mr. Kelly Bryant. It looks like a new challenger is approaching in Clemson. As now, and I'm reading it right here, word for word from Athlon Sports, the arrival of stud quarterback Trevor Lawrence introduced a fascinating subplot that lasted the entire offseason and will probably stretch into the season. Brandon, I want to ask you, who should be the starter and who will be the starter for the Clemson Tigers this year? Stud quarterback Trevor Lawrence or the incumbent starter Kelly Bryant?
That was fun.
I like how they actually put in their stud quarterback Trevor Lawrence.
So I have to say Kelly Bryant should be very worried about his starting job. Mm-hmm. Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion, should be the starter and will be the starter at the beginning of the season.
Ooh, so right away.
So okay. Trevor Lawrence is not only the number one quarterback in the 2018 class, mm-hmm. he was the best overall player in the 2018 class. Mm-hmm. That's impressive. So there he has that going right away. This is a guy, he's got great zip on his throws. And many have said that is he not only has the great zip on his throws, but that this guy is beyond mm-hmm. where your average, normal high school quarterback, guy coming out of high school, should mm-hmm. be at. So that's already encouraging. Strong accuracy. You want him to go deep, he can go deep consistently. And he can also put the right touch on the short crossing patterns. That's so important, to be able to have that touch on the deep passes just as much as going short and quick over the middle. 16.6 yards per throw in high school. 16.6 yards per throw. That's ridiculous. He never had anything lower than a 60% completion rate. He's 6'6", and he's got great instincts. He's not the runner that we've seen from Clemson, but he probably won't have to be if he has all of this.
But the one thing, I'm going to cut you off really quick because I'm watching some of his highlight here. He might not be a runner, but he is elusive in that pocket.
I was just going to say,
he will. I know high school's different than college.
It's funny because he has said that he's really not that much of a runner, but if he needs to run, I can run.
Well, and the thing I love, I just picked the first video that I saw from Max Preps on it, but like the thing I'm liking so far is, first off, he's slippery in the pocket, where it's like he'll dip a shoulder to avoid getting tackled, but his eyes are always looking downfield to where it's like, I'm going to look, all right, I'm going to reset if I can, and then fire that cannon down the field.
Yeah, I mean, this guy is good. This guy
you don't see that from Kelly Bryant.
You don't. And with Kelly Bryant, first of all, what the Tigers need to do this season is they need to stretch the field in the passing game. And if they want to do that, and if they want to do that successfully, Kelly Bryant is not going to be your guy. Kelly Bryant can pass the football, but Kelly Bryant is much more comfortable just tucking it and running it. Mm-hmm. They need a guy like Trevor Lawrence. They want a guy like Trevor Lawrence, and they have Trevor Lawrence. Frickin' put him in the lineup. Mm-hmm. Put him at the starting quarterback position, and he is going to be a stud. Now, yes, all these good things I read, that's outstanding. But are there going to be some flaws? Sure. Is he going to be probably a raw talent and you're going to be able to mold him and everything like that? Yeah, I'm sure he will be able to. But what we're getting in his raw form right now, it's going to be good. Mm-hmm. You're going to have a whole lot to work with because he's got so much talent and so much skill. This is a guy who I do believe, though, should be starting for the Clemson Tigers because he does give them, with what they're going to be trying to do, a better chance to win.
Well, and it's exactly what you were talking about with the fact of just by watching his film, he looks the part to me.
Well, he looks like a quarterback.
Exactly.
And no offense to Kelly Bryant, this guy looks like a quarterback.
I'll be completely honest with Kelly Bryant. Like last year, dude got a little bit lucky in my mind. Should have lost to Auburn. Like, weaseled out of that game. I know he got injured in that game and came back. They should have lost that game 14-6. That should have been a loss early on. He played, like, to quote the great Jim Mora, diddly poo in that game. Then it's like you look at the Syracuse game. Didn't play very well in that one. Didn't have a touchdown. Yeah, didn't throw an INT, but you didn't have a touchdown in that game. NC State, you just squeeze out of there with a 7-point win. Then it's like, all right, you show up in the NC title game. Well, your team did. You only had one touchdown, but at least you didn't turn over the ball. You blow out Miami. But then when we put a real team in front of you in Alabama, and Clemson fans are going to get mad at that, in that semifinal game, he didn't play well at all. 0 touchdowns, 2 INTs.
24-6
only
the final score.
24.
Is that right?
What?
24-6 the final score?
Yeah, 24-6. You got a good photographic memory there, Brandon, for your Alabama Crimson Tide. But a $124, 50% completion percentage. Kelly Bryant's the guy where last year he was their best option.
Yeah, Kelly Bryant's the guy you put in a pinch
this year. Yeah, he will not be their best option this year. And the thing that I was trying to look for is the big board I can't find, but even for the way too early mock draft already for the NFL that came out, Todd McShay, there's 2 guys for Clemson, 2 guys that he already has in the top 10 picks. And I get that it's a way too early mock draft and people are going to go, well, Ricky, those players are going to fall. Already in the way too early mock draft, Clemson has 2 guys in the top 10. Those guys being Dexter Lawrence, defensive tackle, and also Clelin Ferrell, who we've talked about before.
Oh, yeah.
We had him in big boards. We had him in mock drafts before he said he was going to come back. And then another guy that we talked about before he said he was going to come back in Christian Wilkins, D lineman from Clemson. So it's like this defense is going to be so good on one end that if you give them the right quarterback, I will say this, if Trevor Lawrence starts for Clemson, what I said in the NC State prediction will be true. Clemson will win every game this season, every regular season game this season. They will then win the ACC and go into the playoffs as either the number 1, number 2 team, depending on how many people are undefeated. If Kelly Bryant starts, they lose against NC State and don't make the playoff. If Kelly Bryant starts, I don't think they beat NC State this year. And the only reason in the last segment I made the prediction I did was because I'm on the bandwagon, you are. Trevor Lawrence should be the starter for this team. I know he'd be just a freshman, but you got to put in the guy that gives you the best chance to win, because when you're a Clemson team, all it takes is one game. All it takes is an NC State game. All it takes is a Texas A&M earlier in the year. All it takes is a Miami team getting ready and actually playing against you in a title game for you to be sitting back on, man, I should have just played Trevor Lawrence, man. I wouldn't be surprised if Kelly Bryant wins the job and is the starter, but I'm telling you, if he is the starter, he is getting pulled week 2 at Texas A&M, and Trevor Lawrence will be the starter from there on out.
I would be very surprised if Kelly Bryant is the starter.
I wouldn't be surprised if he was.
I would be very surprised, because not to beat down on Kelly Bryant, but we
kind of are.
Well, he kind of isn't that good.
Yeah, okay.
So I think that's what we need to say. And I don't want to say that he's a guy who can manage and kind of be the game manager for a team, but he's not going to be the guy that puts you over the hump. And not to say that Clemson was in a world of hurt last year, they were not, but they need to go with a guy, and the guy of the future it's Trevor Lawrence. And I think that if you look at Kelly Bryant and you put him in as the starter, you don't just possibly lose to NC State, you possibly lose to Texas A&M, you possibly lose to Florida State.
I wouldn't go that far.
No, I would.
I'd say
you
Boston
possibly
College.
lose to Boston College. You're looking at.
We could say Syracuse, because Syracuse beat Kelly Bryant last year.
You're looking at a guy, and now we're going to have Clemson people who are Kelly Bryant fans going, just shut up. But here's the point that I think we're both trying to make, though, Ricky, is that the Kelly Bryant era has ended. It is over. Thank you, Kelly, for all of your transition. Thank you for everything you've done, Kelly. Thank you very much. But we've now found sunshine in Trevor Lawrence. Sunshine. And that's kind of who he reminds me of. He reminds me of Sunshine from Remember the Titans, just a little bit. Maybe not a lot, but a little bit. And I think it's the long blonde hair.
I hope he can pitch the ball better than Sunshine could.
But I just, with everything that I've seen on this guy, my question would be, Dabo, how do you not have him as your starter? How do you not have him as your starter? That would be my whole thing. When you go away from the defense, when you go away from the offense, you look at the defense. The defensive line right away, it's just unfair. It's just going to be unfair for opposing offenses.
Not just
because
that.
They have 3 very future could have been NFL guys already. They've got them right there on their offensive line, just licking their chops every single week.
And I looked it up. Farrell and Lawrence, not just top 10 in McShay's way too early mock draft. When it comes to Mel Kiper's way too early big board, they're both in the top 11.
Yeah.
And it's only because Farrell's at 11 in that. It could easily be both of them in the top 10 for the big board as well. So, I mean, to me, the Clemson defense is going to be what we rant and rave about all year, but it won't take long for Trevor Lawrence to become a household name, and for Clemson fans, if they haven't already, to just be clamoring his name and chanting his name from the highest of mountaintops.
And Kelly Bryant will be a very serviceable backup.
Well, it'll be one of those things where it's like, hey, like we'll look 5 years down the line. Hey, remember Kelly Bryant? Yeah, he was a good transition out of Deshaun Watson, right into the Trevor Lawrence era. Like, that is what the Kelly Bryant era or Kelly Bryant footnote will be in the Clemson history book to me. It was a one-season transitional period. They found our guy, because looking at the film from Trevor Lawrence, I'm going to say something that is going to be maybe me jumping the gun a lot, but I would not be surprised looking at what I see from Trevor Lawrence, how he develops, to see how he develops at Clemson. By the time we get to draft time where he's on NFL radars and able to be draftable, I would not be surprised if we are not A, talking about him as a top quarterback talent, or B, at least talking about him as a first-round talent like we were with many of the quarterbacks this year.
Well, here's, again, to go to that point, like I mentioned before, he was not just the number one quarterback in this draft class. He was the number one overall player.
Yeah.
And I guess I would see it, he would have to really just not pan out, get injured, all that kind of stuff, for him not to be a potential first-round talent in the NFL.
Well, not even that. Usually quarterbacks, I would say, that are number one, number two guys in recruiting classes, they're usually guys that are, all right, that translates to your number one, number two pick. Like, you're supposed to be that good to where we're looking at it going, all right, you're supposed to be one of the chosen ones that we put at the top of our draft classes each and every year. Like, I'm just going to pull up really quick just for shits and giggles. I'll just do pro-style quarterbacks because it's only given me pro-style quarterbacks to look at. I'm going to go back, let's see, 20. What's a good year you want to go back to? Let's go 2010.
2010 is what I was going to say.
That's far enough back where the number one, I'm just going to look up, the top quarterback that year was, if I scroll through, wow, there were a lot of better players on top of quarterbacks. It was Philip Sims was the best pro quarterback.
He really panned
that
out well.
year, but he was 31st overall.
Okay.
He was 31st. Like, the guys who were the top 5 guys, and this is from 24/7 Sports, Ronald Powell, who went to Florida, was number 1. Chantrell Henderson was number 2. He was an offensive tackle. Robert Woods, who went to SC, he was number 3. Dominic Easley was number 4. Sharif Floyd, number 6. There's a first rounder. Marcus Lavenport, what would have he been if he didn't get injured? He was number 9. Keenan Allen was 10. You had Kyle Prater, LaMarcus Joyner, D. Milner.
I mean, you're seeing a lot of these guys that are still in the NFL and still thriving pretty well.
Alec Ogletree was right there at 19. Like, I'm looking down the list.
I think you have 2 guys on that list so far that you've named that are on the LA Rams currently. And the other one, Keenan Allen, he's over on the LA Chargers now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I think they're all thriving still in the NFL.
So, I mean, there's a good bet that he is going to be, at least for sure, a first-round talent that we talk about 3 years down the line.
Well, it's going to be really fun, I think, to watch him, you know, from now until when he graduates or when he leaves and heads to the NFL, because, you know, we said that it's true. I mean, we had a great quarterback class this last season. But did we have a quarterback that was the number 1 quarterback and the number 1 overall in their draft class in terms of this last class?
Let's see. Sam Darnold recruiting. Let's see what 24/7 Sports had him as for his recruiting profile. Is it going to give me the option to move over? There it was. So Sam Darnold for 24/7 Sports was the 21st ranked Californian prospect. He was the 5th ranked dual threat prospect, and nationally ranked he was 148th coming in. This class, though, the one thing I will say, like, I was going to type in Baker Mayfield, like, he's a guy that when he was coming in, there was no way that he was going to be a top one. Here's a good one. Josh Rosen, 3rd in the state of California when he came into college. He was the number 1 pro-style quarterback, 11th national ranked. So think of Josh Rosen, 11 national ranked, one of the top pro-style quarterbacks, and he went what, top 10? Top 10 in the draft this past year? So, I mean, there's a really good chance that not just Trevor Lawrence is going to do good things for Clemson this year, but down the year, and this will be the beginning of the Trevor Lawrence era in Clemson. Any final thoughts you want to say about Clemson this season? I know we kind of pushed it into what they could be, but you got any final thoughts as the camera dies about Clemson this season?
My final thought would be Clemson, barring any injuries to every single position and an asteroid taking out the entire team, should win the Atlantic and head back to the playoffs.
Well, this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. How good is Clemson going to be this year? Should Kelly Bryant be the starter? Should Trevor Lawrence be the starter? Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. A little bit of housekeeping here at the end. If you want to help support MVP more so than you already are by listening and watching, make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. You can also buy one of our great MVP t-shirts down below in the store link. You can also catch that store at mostvaluablepodcast.com, where you can catch MVP each and every day. Last but not least, if you are listening on iTunes, you're on Apple Podcasts, or if you have an iTunes or Apple Podcast account, make sure to go give the Primetime Podcast a 5-star rating, and make sure to tell us why you love listening to the podcast each and every week. It would really help us out. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening, and as always, have a good day, everybody.